Hollywood's golden age promised glamour, but behind the scenes, cameras captured nervous breakdowns, uncontrolled tears, and real-life danger. The shocking truth behind the 7 classic stars whose most famous moments weren't acted at all. When directors refused to say, "cut," the line between performance and pain vanished. What pushed these legends beyond their scripts, and why did the studios keep rolling when everything became real? Studio call sheets from Hollywood's heyday routinely listed shooting days that stretched 14 hours or more, with barely a break between scenes. Sound stages overflowed with heavy lights, tangled cords, and set pieces squeezed into every available corner. Crew testimonies from the era describe floors slick with water for dramatic effect, ladders left standing mid-scene, and extras packed in so tightly that safety was often an afterthought. Producers demanded speed and spectacle, instructing directors to keep cameras rolling for as many takes as it took to capture something authentic. Payroll records and oral histories confirm that actors and crew sometimes worked weeks without a true day off, their exhaustion visible in both faces and performances. Studio memos from the 1940s and the 1950s reveal a clear directive. If a scene produced real tears, a stumble, or a moment of panic, print it, no matter the cost. These pressures created an environment where lines blurred between acting and reality, and where the most unforgettable moments sometimes came from genuine distress, not the script. On the Nevada desert set of The Misfits, Marilyn Monroe's private turmoil bled straight into the film. The morning of the corral scene, Monroe arrived shaken from an argument with Arthur Miller, her husband, and the film's screenwriter. She had found notes he had written about her, and the confrontation left her visibly devastated. By the time the cameras rolled, Monroe had already endured hours of tension. On take 27, after Clark Gable delivered the line, "You are the saddest girl I ever met," Monroe broke down. The tears were not in the script. Crew diaries and production notes describe her sobbing as raw and uncontrollable, a collapse that left the set silent. Director John Huston, recognizing the authenticity of the moment, ordered the footage to be kept. Studio executives worried about the commercial risk of showing Monroe so exposed, but Huston insisted this was not acting, it was Marilyn, caught on film at her most vulnerable. The scene remains one of the most haunting in her career, preserved because it was real. Judy Garland arrived on set for A Star is Born facing a schedule that tested the limits of endurance. MGM call sheets logged days that stretched past 18 hours, often with only a few hours rest before the next call. The Born in a Trunk sequence, meant to be a showstopper, turned into a marathon of retakes and costume changes that dragged on for weeks and ran far over budget. Crew diaries from camera and wardrobe describe Garland pushing herself through take after take, sometimes swaying from fatigue, her voice hoarse and her movements heavy. Director George Cukor refused to stop rolling when Garland's exhaustion began to show, instructing the crew to keep the cameras running even as she faltered. The weariness visible in her eyes and the tremor in her voice in the final cut were not performance choices. They were the result of relentless pressure. Production logs confirm that some of the most powerful moments in the sequence came after hours of filming, when Garland could barely stand. Her struggle was captured on film as the real cost of making movie magic in the studio era. This raw, exhausted performance helped make the scene unforgettable, and it reveals the human price paid behind the glamour. James Stewart stepped onto the set of It's a Wonderful Life carrying memories that never faded. After flying 20 combat missions over Europe in World War II, he returned from the war changed. Friends noticed the weight in his eyes, the tension in his hands. During the bridge-side breakdown scene, Stewart's sobbing and trembling were not written into the script. Director Frank Capra, aware of Stewart's wartime losses, quietly reminded him of the men he had flown with, the ones who never made it home. The effect was immediate. On the first take, Stewart's voice cracked, his face contorted, and the tears came without restraint. Crew members stood silent as the camera rolled, recognizing that this was not performance, but memory breaking through. Capra later admitted in interviews with the American Film Institute that he had deliberately pressed Stewart's deepest wounds to capture the rawest truth possible. Stewart wrote to friends that he felt hollowed out after filming, unable to separate himself from George Bailey's despair. The pain on screen was not imagined. It was Stewart reliving what he could never forget, preserved in a single unguarded moment. Vivien Leigh's body gave out before her spirit ever did. During the filming of the infamous whipping scene in Gone with the Wind, production health reports from Selznick International recorded that Leigh was running a fever, with some crew members recalling the thermometer reading as high as 102 degrees. Continuity notes from those days describe her hands shaking uncontrollably, her skin damp with sweat, and her voice barely above a whisper. The tremor visible in the finished film was not a performance choice. It was the real result of illness and exhaustion after months of relentless shooting. Studio memos confirm that Leigh had already fainted more than once during production, and the set doctor recommended halting work, but Leigh insisted on continuing. The cameras kept rolling as she steeled herself for each take, her body trembling as the whip cracked. Director Victor Fleming and producer David O. Selznick reviewed the footage and chose to keep the rawest moments. The visible trembling, the catch in her breath, and the way she nearly collapses were not imagined for Scarlett O'Hara. They were Leigh's own symptoms, captured and immortalized, because the studio valued the authenticity of her suffering over her recovery. The line between acting and reality disappeared, leaving behind a performance shaped as much by fever as by craft. Montgomery Clift's face told a story that no makeup or lighting could erase. In May 1956, a car crash left him with a shattered jaw, a broken nose, and nerve damage that paralyzed part of his face. The change is visible in every frame shot after the accident. His mouth droops slightly, one cheek is stiff, and his speech is sometimes slurred. Continuity stills from Raintree County reveal the unevenness, scene by scene, as production resumed just weeks after his surgery. Studio editing logs show that takes were often chosen not for technical perfection, but for the raw emotion Clift brought to the role, pain and vulnerability that matched his character's turmoil. Director Edward Dmytryk and later John Huston on The Misfits refused to hide these traces. Instead, they let the camera linger on Clift's altered features, folding his real-life injury into the heart of the performance. Insurance memos and internal correspondence confirm that reshooting or disguising his appearance was never a serious option. What made it to the screen was not an illusion, but the permanent record of a body and spirit marked by trauma, visible proof that some scars cannot be acted. Buster Keaton stood alone in the dust, staring at a two-story wall rigged to fall. The blueprint for the gag was simple, but the margin for error was not. Crew accounts, including cameraman Bert Haynes, describe a single nail hammered into the ground as Keaton's only guide, a mark he had to hit with absolute precision. The wall, weighing more than 2 tons, was cut with an attic window just wide enough for his body. By every estimate, there were no more than 2 inches of clearance on either side. No stunt double stood by, and no trick photography was used. Keaton's confidence masked the reality. A misstep by even a hair would have crushed him. As the director called action, the wall crashed down. For a split second, it enveloped him, stopping with a thud as Keaton remained perfectly still. Eyewitnesses later recalled his face turning pale, his eyes unfocused, as if he had just glimpsed the edge of danger. The stoic expression that made it into the final cut was not a performance. It was the genuine shock of a man who had trusted math and luck, and who survived by barely more than a breath. The moment stands as one of cinema's purest collisions of calculation and real, unfiltered danger. Today, actors have unions and safety standards, yet the demand for authenticity still blurs the line between performance and reality. The legacy of these UN-scripted moments endures, reminding us that what captivates on screen often comes at a hidden human cost. What are we truly applauding?
The archives don't lie. Buried in old love letters, diaries, and forgotten memoirs are the real stories Hollywood refused to print. Greta Garbo's hidden love letters. In old Hollywood, silence could protect a career or bury the truth. Greta Garbo understood that better than anyone. She was the most famous woman on screen by the late 1920s, yet almost no one knew who she loved when the camera stopped. Her secret companion was playwright and poet Mercedes de Acosta, a woman whose sharp wit and open bisexuality terrified the studios. They met in 1931 at a party in New York. Garbo was shy, almost cold. De Acosta was bold and magnetic. Within weeks, they started exchanging letters, then visits. Garbo's fame made privacy nearly impossible, but she and de Acosta found ways. Garbo often signed her notes with pet names, sometimes just an initial. De Acosta wrote back pages filled with longing. Those letters, now kept at the Rosenbach Museum, show a romance that survived for decades in shadows. The studios couldn't know. A same-sex relationship, even whispered, could end contracts overnight. MGM's publicity team built Garbo's image around mystery. Reporters called her the Swedish Sphinx. That secrecy worked. It hid her real life in plain sight. De Acosta was less guarded. She wrote about love and freedom and wanted to live openly. Friends warned her that Hollywood's moral code was brutal, but she didn't care. She once said, "I can be silent about many things, but not about love." Garbo disagreed. For her, silence was survival. Their relationship stretched across continents. Garbo filmed in California, de Acosta wrote in New York, and their letters crossed the Atlantic for years. One line from Garbo's hand still stands out. "I dream of seeing you and cannot think of anyone else." It wasn't just friendship. By the early 1940s, their bond had faded. Fame hardened Garbo, rejection bruised de Acosta. When de Acosta later published her memoir, Here Lies the Heart, Garbo cut her off completely. Still, those letters, 55 of them, remained proof that the Ice Queen of cinema had burned quietly inside. Garbo never married, never spoke of de Acosta again, and never denied it either. In a town built on illusion, she mastered the art of truth without confession. For a woman who lived in silence, her words on paper said everything. Marlene Dietrich's double life. In the 1930s, Marlene Dietrich turned scandal into style. She wore tuxedos, kissed women on film, and never apologized for it. Hollywood had never seen a woman so self-assured and so quietly defiant. On screen, she was exotic and dangerous. Off-screen, she lived that same way, only with fewer cameras. Dietrich's charm reached both men and women, but her female lovers were the ones she protected most. One of them was Mercedes de Acosta, the same woman who once loved Greta Garbo. Their affair burned fast. They met in Paris, where gossip traveled slower and their connection was impossible to miss. Friends said Dietrich treated Mercedes like a mirror, bold, creative, and endlessly dramatic. She also grew close to Edith Piaf, the French singer whose voice defined heartbreak. The two met in the late 1930s and shared what Piaf later described as a friendship deeper than lovers. Dietrich visited Piaf during her tours, brought her gifts, and wrote letters full of affection. Biographers still debate how far that relationship went, but Maria Riva, Dietrich's daughter, later confirmed that her mother's female affairs were real. Publicly, Dietrich leaned into her androgyny. She strolled into nightclubs in full men's suits, sometimes with a woman on her arm. When the Los Angeles Times criticized her for crossing gender lines, she smiled for the cameras and said nothing. Every silence became part of her legend. The studio system tried to tame her, but Dietrich was untouchable. She knew her audience. When asked why she dressed like a man, she once quipped, "Because I look better in it than most men do." That confidence became armor. Even during World War II, when she entertained Allied troops, rumors followed her. Some officers whispered that she was too close to her female assistants. She laughed it off and lit another cigarette. Dietrich never labeled herself. She lived decades before bisexual was a safe word to use, but she never denied anything either. Her life was her answer. Tallulah Bankhead's fearless affairs. She didn't whisper her secrets, she laughed them out loud. By the 1930s, she was already Broadway royalty, famous for her raspy voice, champagne charm, and scandal that followed her like perfume. While others hid behind studio contracts, Tallulah didn't care who knew she slept with men or women. "I'm ambisextrous," she joked, and everyone understood exactly what she meant. Her first same-sex relationship that made the papers was with actress Patsy Kelly, who later confirmed their fling in a 1990s interview. Back then, that kind of honesty could end a career. For Bankhead, it only added to her legend. She hosted roaring after-parties filled with stage stars, socialites, and women she liked to call her darlings. She was wild, witty, and impossible to control. Tallulah flirted with everyone: Garbo, Dietrich, Billie Holiday. Some said she had brief affairs with all three. Whether that's true or not, it's clear she never let gender stop her. Her attraction was about energy, not rules. Friends described her as magnetic. You either fell for her or you didn't last 5 minutes in her orbit. The Hollywood studios didn't know what to do with her. She was too blunt for MGM and too unpredictable for Paramount. In interviews, she'd throw censors off balance. Once, when asked what she wore to bed, she fired back, "Radio." During World War II, she entertained troops just like Dietrich, sometimes singing bawdy songs that left generals red-faced. Behind the humor was a rare kind of courage. Bankhead lived exactly as she pleased in an age when women couldn't even admit attraction to other women. She was also close to Tennessee Williams, who adored her personality and later modeled parts of Blanche Dubois and Amanda Wingfield after her. He called her the bravest woman I ever met. That mix of defiance and vulnerability gave his characters life and proved how deeply Tallulah's spirit touched those around her. By the 1950s, her fame began to fade, but her legend only grew louder. Younger stars called her outrageous, but they secretly admired her nerve. She'd paved a path they could actually walk later. Alla Nazimova's sewing circle secret. Before Hollywood had closets to come out of, Alla Nazimova built one big enough for everyone. The Russian-born actress arrived in the 1910s, already a star of New York theater. When she moved west, she brought her stage fame, her confidence, and her lovers. She didn't hide them. She simply refused to explain them. Nazimova owned a mansion on Sunset Boulevard called the Garden of Allah, where artists, writers, and actors gathered without judgment. To outsiders, it was just another lavish party house. Inside, it became a rare space where women who loved women could breathe. The gatherings were so famous that guests jokingly called the network of queer actresses the Sewing Circle. That phrase later became Hollywood code for closeted women in the industry. Nazimova's lovers included Jean Acker, the first wife of Rudolph Valentino, and Mercedes de Acosta, who moved through the same hidden world of female stars. Their relationships weren't speculation. They're documented in letters, interviews, and contemporary press reports. Nazimova also mentored Dorothy Ardzner, one of the first female film directors, giving her early access to powerful Hollywood circles. She was bold long before it was safe to be. While other actresses signed morality clauses, Nazimova financed and produced films herself, often with subtle queer themes. Her 1923 production of Salome was full of coded imagery, and historians now call it the first art film in Hollywood history. Critics didn't understand it then, but its symbolism was clear to anyone who knew her world. Her open independence cost her dearly. Studios cut her off, and her fortune disappeared. But Nazimova kept her dignity, renting out rooms in her own estate to stay afloat. Even then, the house remained a sanctuary. People who lived there said you could feel her presence in the garden, a reminder that someone had to be brave first. When she died in 1945, most obituaries skipped her private life, but her legacy lingered in the actresses she once protected. Nazimova had given Hollywood's hidden women a place to exist, even if no one could speak their truth aloud. Mercedes de Acosta's dangerous honesty. In a time when most actresses buried their private lives, she wrote hers down. Born in 1893 to a wealthy Cuban-Spanish family in New York, Mercedes was elegant, outspoken, and fearless. She loved women, and she never pretended otherwise. That honesty made her both irresistible and dangerous in Hollywood's secretive social web. By the 1920s, she'd already had affairs with Isadora Duncan, the legendary dancer, and Eva Le Gallienne, the acclaimed stage actress. Her friends called her the woman who could ruin anyone's reputation with one love letter. When she moved to Los Angeles, she carried that reputation like perfume. Studio heads adored her style but feared her openness. Mercedes met Greta Garbo in 1929 and fell hard. Their relationship lasted for years, documented through over 50 letters that now sit in the Rosenbach Museum. But Garbo's silence slowly crushed her. Mercedes wanted love in daylight. Garbo only offered shadows. By the late 1930s, their affair had turned into long silences and coded notes. When the heartbreak became too heavy, she turned her passion into art. Mercedes wrote plays and scripts, often giving her heroines the freedom she couldn't have. Her circle included Marlene Dietrich, Alla Nazimova, and Katharine Cornell, women who lived under the same unspoken rules. She was the thread that tied them together, the confidant who saw everything and kept every secret until it broke her. In 1960, she published Here Lies the Heart, the first memoir from someone inside Hollywood's hidden queer network. The book revealed her emotional life in ways that shocked the industry. She didn't name Garbo directly, but everyone knew. Garbo cut her off permanently, furious at being exposed. The rest of Hollywood followed, treating her like she'd committed social treason. Mercedes spent her later years in poverty, her health fading, her fame erased. Yet her story survived because she refused to lie. Those who dismissed her as a gossip missed the point. By the time she died in 1968, the world was changing. The love she once had to hide was becoming part of history, and the letters she left behind ensured that her truth could never be buried again. Eva Le Gallienne's quiet rebellion. She believed theater was sacred, not a playground for gossip. Yet behind the curtains, she lived a love story that couldn't be spoken aloud. Born in London and raised in New York, Eva became one of America's most respected stage actresses by the 1920s. She built her own repertory company, demanded creative control, and kept her private life guarded like a locked script. Her earliest love was Mercedes de Acosta, the same fiery woman who linked so many actresses of that hidden world. Their relationship was an open secret in theater circles. Mercedes adored Eva's discipline. Eva admired Mercedes's courage. Friends recalled seeing the two holding hands backstage during rehearsals. But while Mercedes wanted to live freely, Eva feared public ruin. She once told a confidant, "The stage gives me everything except the right to be honest." After their breakup, Eva fell into another long romance with Josephine Hutchinson, a rising actress who had been married to a man. When tabloids hinted at unusual friendship, studio lawyers forced Hutchinson to call Eva her mentor. Both women stayed silent, though their partnership lasted nearly a decade. The press eventually moved on, but the cost of discretion was heavy. Eva poured her heartbreak into her work. She founded the Civic Repertory Theater in Manhattan and gave opportunities to dozens of women writers and performers. Her company refused commercial interference, running shows for art, not profit. Critics called her stubborn. History calls her revolutionary. During the 1940s, she performed The Cherry Orchard and The Three Sisters to packed houses. Reviewers praised her emotional range, but never guessed how much of that intensity came from lived experience. Love gained, love hidden, love lost. In later years, she mentored younger actresses who were also quietly queer, offering advice and refuge instead of lectures. She never labeled herself, but she didn't pretend either. When asked late in life about her love affairs, she smiled and said, "People should worry less about who we love and more about what we create." Eva Le Gallienne never married, never apologized, and never stopped performing. Katharine Hepburn and her constant companion. She spent 6 decades pretending not to care what anyone thought, but she cared deeply about privacy. The public saw a sharp-tongued, pants-wearing rebel who challenged every rule in Hollywood. Few realized that her independence was partly built on one long, hidden relationship with Laura Harding, the woman she called her closest friend, but treated like a partner. They met in the early 1930s, when Hepburn was still climbing the ladder at RKO. Harding was wealthy, witty, and completely devoted. She managed Hepburn's day-to-day life, helped pick her wardrobe, traveled on set, and shared her home. Studio publicists referred to Harding as an assistant, but insiders knew better. They lived together for nearly 10 years, and even after moving into separate houses, their connection never faded. Biographer William J. Mann wrote that Harding's name was quietly erased from Hepburn's story once the studios realized it didn't fit the image they wanted. The press painted Hepburn as a stubborn loner, then later as one half of a passionate pairing with Spencer Tracy, but the real emotional constant was Laura Harding, not Tracy. When Hepburn became famous, gossip writers asked why she never married. She shrugged it off with lines like, "Marriage is a kind of partnership, and I already have one." Most took that as sarcasm. It wasn't. Harding stood beside Hepburn through scandals, box office flops, and comebacks. When Hepburn won her first Oscar in 1934, she dedicated it to someone who keeps me sane. She never said who. Harding was in the audience that night. As decades passed, Hepburn built a reputation for independence that both inspired and confused fans. She wore trousers when no one else dared, refused interviews that pried into her love life, and bought her own home when studios expected her to live under contract. Beneath that boldness was a quiet, private tenderness that she protected fiercely. After Harding's death, Hepburn spoke rarely of her. Friends said she kept photos of Laura on her bedside table until the end of her life. The world called her unconventional. Barbara Stanwyck's carefully guarded life. On screen, she was sharp, composed, and impossible to read. Off-screen, she was the same, except for the secrets that never made it into the magazines. Her public life revolved around men, but her private circle told another story. Those who knew her well said she shared deep, quiet relationships with women, though she made sure no one could ever prove it. She grew up tough in Brooklyn, losing both parents before she was 5. That early independence hardened her. By the time she reached Hollywood in the 1930s, she had one rule: never let anyone own you. She married actor Frank Fay, but the relationship was violent and short-lived. The studio turned her divorce into a redemption story. Stanwyck turned it into armor. Biographers Axel Madsen and Victoria Wilson later uncovered whispers that followed her for decades. One of the longest-running stories was her close relationship with actress Marjorie Main, best known for playing the loud, lovable Ma Kettle. The two lived near each other for years, took long drives in the desert, and were often seen dining together away from the Hollywood crowd. Main never denied it, but neither did she confirm. Stanwyck didn't care for rumors. She avoided interviews about her personal life, telling one reporter, "People don't need to know everything. Let them guess." And guess they did. Studio executives liked her image as a no-nonsense woman who could match any man on screen. They didn't want that narrative disturbed. Her performances in films like Double Indemnity and Sorry Wrong Number reflected her real self. Tough, guarded, lonely. Co-stars said she had an emotional wall that few could cross. Yet those who made it inside described her as surprisingly tender and loyal. She hosted quiet gatherings at her home where the guest list was small, private, and safe. By the 1950s, gossip about her private life had faded, but her reputation for mystery remained. When asked late in her career if she ever wanted to remarry, she smiled and said, "No, I've had the best company already." No one asked who she meant. Katharine Cornell's secret partnership. In the 1930s and 1940s, her name meant class. She was the actress critics called the First Lady of the theater. What they didn't mention was the woman who stood beside her for decades, Nancy Hamilton, her lifelong partner in work and love. Cornell married stage director Guthrie McClintock in 1921, but it was a practical match. They shared a passion for theater, not romance. McClintock was gay, and Cornell's heart belonged to Nancy. The three built a creative alliance that fooled the press for years. Together, they staged some of Broadway's most successful plays, with Hamilton quietly writing lyrics and sketches that Cornell performed. Those close to them knew the truth. They lived together in a Manhattan townhouse, vacationed together, and were rarely seen apart. Their relationship was so stable that friends stopped pretending it was friendship, yet the media never touched the story. Cornell's fame was too pristine to risk scandal. Hamilton, a writer and filmmaker, won an Academy Award in 1955 for her documentary Helen Keller and Her Story. Cornell sat proudly beside her at the ceremony. Publicly, they called each other collaborators. Privately, they were everything a real couple could be. Broadway insiders admired how carefully Cornell balanced her double life. She wasn't loud about her defiance like Tallulah Bankhead, and she didn't leave written confessions like Mercedes Acosta. She simply lived her truth quietly and refused to let anyone label it. When asked in an interview why she'd never moved to Hollywood, Cornell said, "The stage lets me breathe. There's more honesty there." That honesty extended further than anyone realized. Their home became a safe place for younger actresses who didn't fit the era's rules. They could talk openly, laugh freely, and, for a few hours, exist without pretending. Cornell treated her theater company the same way, with fairness and warmth that made her legendary among peers. Gene Acker and Hollywood's first scandal. Before Hollywood learned how to hide its secrets, Gene Acker accidentally exposed one. She was a silent film actress in the 1910s, sharp-featured, elegant, and openly drawn to women long before it was safe. In 1919, she made a decision that would make her name famous for all the wrong reasons. She married Rudolph Valentino, then walked out of the honeymoon suite the same night. The press called it the shortest marriage in Hollywood. Acker never explained, but friends already knew why. She'd been living with actress Grace Darmond, her real partner, when she agreed to marry Valentino in a moment of impulse. Some said it was a publicity stunt. Others said she panicked when she realized what the wedding would mean. Either way, she locked Valentino out of their hotel room and filed for divorce before their wedding cake had gone stale. Acker and Darmond quietly moved back in together after the scandal. They attended events side by side, called each other dear, and even co-starred in a few films. While gossip columns joked about female roommates, insiders knew the truth. They weren't hiding very well, but audiences in the 1920s preferred not to see what was in plain sight. When Valentino died suddenly in 1926, the tabloids dragged Acker back into the headlines. She wept at his funeral, and reporters tried to frame it as lost love. In truth, she was mourning a friend, and the chaos fame had caused both of them. She later admitted that their marriage was a mistake, but said she had no regrets. Acker never regained major stardom, but she remained part of Hollywood's quiet queer circle that included Alla Nazimova and Mercedes Acosta. They supported each other in a town built on image. By the 1940s, she'd faded into smaller character roles and television cameos. Still, she stayed loyal to her community, helping young actresses find safe places to work and live. From the tragic accident that almost crippled her to being turned into a punching bag by her husband while pregnant, Doris Day has no doubt gone through hell. But on TV screens, she was the perfect girl next door. Little did most of her fans know what was truly going on behind closed doors. We'll get to that. In case you don't know who Doris Day was, you're in for a treat. Doris Day, an icon. Born Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff on April 3, 1922, she was an American actress and singer who took the industry by storm. Her journey began back in 1939 when she kicked off her career as a big band singer. Fast forward to 1945, and she hit it big with not just one but two chart-topping songs, Sentimental Journey and My Dreams Are Getting Better All the Time, thanks to her collaboration with Les Brown and his band of renown. But Doris wasn't just about the band life, she was ready to fly solo. She ditched Brown and embarked on a solo career that saw her record over 650 songs from 1947 to 1967. Talk about a powerhouse. In the 1950s and 1960s, Doris was one of the leading ladies of Hollywood. Her film career took off with the 1948 flick Romance on the High Seas, and from there she starred in a little bit of everything. Musicals, comedies, dramas, and even thrillers. Remember her as Calamity Jane in Calamity Jane, 1953? Or maybe you caught her in Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1956, alongside James Stewart. She had some unforgettable on-screen chemistry with Rock Hudson, co-starring in 3 successful comedies, including the classic Pillow Talk, 1959, which even earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. And let's not forget her appearances with the likes of Clark Gable, Cary Grant, James Cagney, and Frank Sinatra. She truly shared the screen with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. But she didn't just stop at movies. After hanging up her film boots in 1968, just as her star was shining at its brightest, she launched into television with The Doris Day Show, which ran from 1968 to 1973. Doris's talent didn't go unnoticed. She snagged a Golden Globe and the Cecil B. DeMille Award for Lifetime Achievement in Motion Pictures in 1989. Then, in 2004, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. No big deal, right? And if that wasn't enough, she also grabbed the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2008 and a Legend Award from the Society of Singers. In 2011, she scored the Los Angeles Film Critics Association's Career Achievement Award, proving she was still in the game. Just when you thought she'd slow down, Doris released her 29th studio album, My Heart, in 2011, which was packed with new material and even hit the UK top 10. By 2020, she was one of only 8 recording artists to have topped the box office in the US 4 times. But now, to the not-so-glamorous parts you may not have known. The accident. On October 14, 1937, Doris Kappelhoff, then a bright-eyed 16-year-old dancer from Cincinnati, found herself in a starkly different world as she lay in a hospital bed at Mercy Hospital. Just hours before, she had been filled with dreams of a dazzling Hollywood future, preparing to take the leap into stardom. That dream now lay in shambles around her, shattered by a terrible car accident that had altered the course of her life. The night before the accident was supposed to be a celebration. Doris, along with her dance partner Jerry Dougherty, had just signed a 5-year contract with an organization that supplied dancers to the movie industry in Hollywood. They were ready to embark on a new adventure, leaving behind the familiar stages of the Netherland Plaza Hotel and the Cincinnati Club, where they had performed countless times. Friends had gathered for a farewell party at the home of Mr. Clarence Holden, offering well wishes and sending them off with dreams of success. Doris and Jerry felt unstoppable, fueled by the excitement of what lay ahead. But as fate would have it, the ride home from the party took a tragic turn. Doris, Jerry, and 2 other friends, Albert Schroeder and Marion Bonekamp, were in the car when it collided with a freight train at 5th and High Streets. The impact was catastrophic. In an instant, the bright future Doris had envisioned was turned upside down. After the crash, Doris was left lying on the parkway, surrounded by debris, her leg injured, and her dreams feeling distant. As paramedics arrived, the reality of her situation set in. "My leg is broken. My leg is broken," she cried out, her voice filled with fear and desperation as she was loaded into the ambulance. She pleaded for her mother, Alma Kappelhoff, who had planned to accompany her to Hollywood, knowing how much this meant to her daughter. In the chaos, Jerry rushed to her side, his concern palpable as he tried to assess the situation. When he realized the extent of her injuries, it broke his heart. For nearly 6 years, they had danced together, preparing for this moment, and now it felt as if everything had come crashing down. Despite the pain and fear, Doris tried to comfort him, assuring him that she would dance again. After the accident, the hospital staff examined Doris's injuries. They confirmed that she had suffered a broken leg, which would require at least 4 months of recovery. The news was a heavy blow to Doris, who had spent countless hours training in ballet and voice, preparing for her moment in the spotlight. She couldn't help but think of how close she was to achieving her dreams, only to be sidelined by this terrible accident. Doris's mother remained by her side, trying to keep her spirits up. She reminded Doris that they would have to wait until spring for their trip to Hollywood, a statement that felt like salt in the wound. Meanwhile, the other passengers, Albert and Marion, sustained various cuts and bruises but were otherwise okay, which was a small comfort in the aftermath of the crash. As days turned into weeks in the hospital, Doris grappled with her injury and the toll it took on her aspirations. While she was stuck in bed, her dreams of dancing faded like the sunlight outside her window. However, instead of letting despair consume her, Doris began to channel her energy into singing. She recognized that while her dancing career was on hold, her voice could still carry her to new heights. During her recovery, she immersed herself in vocal training, honing her talent and finding solace in music. This decision would ultimately set the stage for a remarkable transformation in her career. Just a few months later, bandleader Les Brown heard Doris's voice and recognized her extraordinary talent. He offered her a chance to sing with his band, which opened the door to her first major hit, Sentimental Journey. From that point on, Doris Day became a household name, charming audiences with her voice and her infectious smile, all the while carrying the lessons learned from that harrowing night. The accident may have altered her path, but it didn't define her. Instead, it shaped her into the iconic figure she would become, showing the world that the show must go on, no matter the obstacles. She was a fake girl next door. Doris Day was the epitome of the girl next door in Hollywood, a bright, cheerful figure who seemed to embody innocence and charm. But let's be real, that persona was a carefully crafted image, a product of what studio executives and publicists wanted to sell to the American public. Behind all that sunshine and sweetness, Doris's life was filled with struggles that didn't quite fit the wholesome package she was expected to deliver. When Doris first hit the scene in the late 1940s, she was marketed like a dream. Films like Romance on the High Seas and Pillow Talk showcased her as the perfect, lovable heroine who always ended up with the guy. And why wouldn't they want to promote that? After World War II, people were craving stories that reaffirmed traditional values, and Doris was just the gal for the job. But here's where it gets interesting. While she was playing these roles, her real life was anything but picture perfect. Even as her career took off, Doris often found herself forced into roles that didn't resonate with her true self. After her split from Jordan, she wanted to branch out and try more serious parts, but Hollywood wasn't having it. Instead, they pushed her back into those light-hearted romantic comedies, reinforcing that sweet girl image. It was like a never-ending cycle of play the part, don't rock the boat. As the years went by, Doris started to feel suffocated by the very persona that had made her a star. By the 1960s, she was a household name, but it came with a hefty price tag of public expectations. People wanted her to keep smiling, keep being that innocent, carefree woman, even as her personal life began to unravel. From marriage problems to substance abuse, the real Doris Day was a far cry from what you saw on TV, and the executives knew this and hid this from the world. She was a punching bag. Doris Day was the golden girl of Hollywood. She was often portrayed as a bubbly, cheerful persona that made her an endearing figure on screen. But behind that sunny exterior was a darker reality, one marked by a series of awful and abusive relationships that would leave deep emotional scars. Doris's first marriage to Al Jordan, a big band musician, began with a whirlwind romance that quickly devolved into a nightmare. They married in 1946, and Doris was excited about starting a family. However, as time went on, the shadows of their relationship grew longer. Al, who struggled with his own demons, reportedly became physically violent towards Doris. This was not just limited to emotional manipulation. He was known to have hit her even while she was pregnant with their son Terry. Imagine the fear and helplessness Doris must have felt, carrying a child while facing such violence from someone she had trusted and loved. The abuse took a significant toll on Doris. It was not merely a series of physical assaults. It was an all-encompassing emotional struggle. Doris had to endure feeling trapped in a marriage where love was replaced by fear. But there was also her career to think of. The pressure to maintain her public image as America's sweetheart compounded her pain. After all, how could someone so beloved be experiencing such turmoil? This facade became an overwhelming burden, forcing her to conceal her struggles while putting on a brave face for the world. But soon enough, even Doris took a stand and said, enough is enough. The tipping point came when Doris realized she could no longer endure the abuse. Summoning every ounce of strength, she left Al, taking their son with her. Leaving was a significant and courageous step, but it was also the beginning of a long healing process. Doris had to confront the trauma of her past while also working hard to provide for her son. The emotional scars from the abuse lingered long after she escaped the situation. It would take years of self-discovery, therapy, and self-reflection for her to reclaim her sense of self-worth. The impact of her first marriage didn't just fade away with time. Doris often spoke about how the violence she experienced shaped her views on relationships and love. Even as she found success in her career, the shadow of her past continued to follow her. For years, she struggled with trust and intimacy, fearing that any new relationship might mirror her experiences with Al. But at another attempt at love, Doris faced an equally worse fate: sleeping with the enemy. When Doris married Martin in 1951, she believed she had found a partner who would support and love her unconditionally. Martin was not just her husband, he was also her manager, guiding her career and helping her navigate Hollywood. For many years it seemed like they were a perfect match. Doris trusted him completely, letting him take the reins on her finances and career decisions. She was focused on her work, pouring herself into singing, acting, and making films. Meanwhile, Martin was handling the business side of things, or so she thought. However, as it turned out, Martin had a darker side that Doris never fully grasped. While she was busy being America's sweetheart, he was allegedly squandering her fortune, which was estimated to be around $20 million at the time. Imagine putting your trust in someone so deeply, only to find out later that they were secretly draining your bank account. It was a betrayal of the highest order. And when Doris learned the truth after Martin's demise in 1968, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. After Martin passed away, Doris began to dig into their finances, and what she uncovered was nothing short of shocking. Not only had Martin mismanaged her money, but he had also kept her completely in the dark about their financial ruin. There were no warnings, no discussions about budgeting, or even any hints that they were in dire straits. Instead, Doris found herself facing the harsh reality of almost being bankrupt. The man she had trusted most had not only betrayed her financially but also emotionally, leaving her feeling lost and alone. To add insult to injury, Martin had taken it a step further by secretly signing her up for a television series, The Doris Day Show, without her knowledge or consent. He knew that this would be a major project for her, but rather than discussing it with her, he just went ahead and made the decision on his own. Her own husband had run you into the ground financially, but he also made major career moves without consulting her. It must have been infuriating for Doris, who had built her career through hard work and determination. Eventually, Doris had to pick up the pieces of her shattered financial situation, and it wasn't easy. She found herself navigating bankruptcy and financial recovery at a time when she was also grappling with the emotional fallout from Martin's betrayal. It was a real wake-up call for her, forcing her to take control of her life in a way she never had to before. She had always relied on Martin to handle the business side, but now she needed to become her own advocate and financial manager. Despite the challenges, Doris faced this new chapter with resilience. She stepped into her role on The Doris Day Show, using it as an opportunity to rebuild her career and regain her financial footing. This series became a significant part of her life, allowing her to showcase her talent to a new generation while also helping to restore her wealth. Slowly but surely, she began to claw her way back from the brink of financial disaster. Looking back, Doris often reflected on her experiences with Martin. She learned the hard way that trust, while essential in relationships, should also be accompanied by awareness and oversight. It was a painful lesson, but it ultimately shaped her into a stronger and more independent woman. She would go on to advocate for animal rights and focus on her passions, turning the page on a tumultuous chapter in her life. She was lonely. Doris Day's life really shows that fame doesn't always come with happiness. Sure, she was the charming girl next door that everyone loved, lighting up the screen and belting out catchy tunes. But behind that bright smile, she often felt more alone than you'd think. It's a real twist, because the more popular she got, the more isolated she felt. Imagine being adored by millions but still feeling lonely at night. As Doris's star began to shine in the 50s and 60s, the pressure to maintain that perfect image only grew. People saw her as this bubbly, carefree icon, but underneath she was battling feelings of isolation. While other celebs might have thrived at glamorous parties, Doris longed for something deeper, real connections with people who got her, not just her public persona. She was in this weird position where everyone loved her, but the fame made it hard to find genuine friendships. The conversations she had often felt like they were skimming the surface, and she craved those heart-to-heart talks that could really make you feel connected. The glitzy world of Hollywood sometimes felt more like a bubble that kept her from forming true bonds. Plus, being under the media's microscope didn't help. Every little thing she did was scrutinized, and her personal life became the topic of gossip. It's like she was on a stage, but the audience only saw a performance, not the person behind the curtain. The very fame that brought her adoration also made it difficult for her to share her real self. She wanted to connect with others, but she was always worried about how people would judge her. Her romantic life added to that loneliness. Her first marriage to Al Jordan was pretty rocky, and her third husband, Martin Melcher, turned out to be a huge disappointment when it came to trusting him with her finances. Those experiences left her feeling scarred and hesitant to open up to new people. She really wanted companionship, but her past made it hard for her to trust anyone. In her quieter moments, Doris reflected on her life and couldn't shake off the sadness. She'd often say that, even with all her success, she felt a void inside. Sure, she had the fame, the fan mail, and the accolades, but none of that could replace the comfort of true companionship. At times, she just wanted someone to share her life with, someone real to lean on in a world that felt so fake. But sadly, she never had that. So she poured herself into her music and acting, maybe hoping that by sharing her feelings, she could connect with others on a deeper level. Songs like Que Sera Sera really hit home, not just for her fans, but for her too. Through her performances, she sought to bridge the gap between the dazzling Doris everyone saw and the lonely woman she felt like inside. The tragic demise. Doris Day's life took a heartbreaking turn when her son, Terry Melcher, passed away. Terry was born in 1942 during her tumultuous first marriage to Al Jordan. As a child, he was surrounded by all Hollywood had to offer, and Doris was fiercely protective of him. She worked hard to give him a stable upbringing, especially considering the chaos she faced in her own life. Terry grew up to become a talented music producer and songwriter, working with some of the biggest names in the industry, like the Byrds and Paul McCartney. He had his own share of success and seemed to be carving out a unique identity in the music world, separate from his mother's enormous shadow. Doris was incredibly proud of him and often spoke about how talented he was, which must have brought her immense joy given the struggles she faced in her relationships. However, the dark clouds of tragedy loomed over their family. In 2004, Terry was diagnosed with skin cancer, and Doris watched helplessly as her beloved son battled the disease. It was a devastating blow for her, as she had already endured so much heartache throughout her life, including abusive relationships and the pressure of fame. Terry fought hard, but the cancer took its toll, and he passed away in November 2004 at the age of 62. The loss of her son was like a devastating earthquake in Doris's life, shaking her to the core. She was deeply affected by his passing, feeling an emptiness that words could hardly describe. Doris often reflected on her relationship with Terry, emphasizing how close they were and how they leaned on each other throughout their lives. After losing him, she poured her grief into her work and her love for animals, dedicating her energy to animal rights activism. It was as if she sought to channel her pain into something positive, honoring Terry's memory by continuing to make the world a better place. One thing is certain, Doris Day was a great actress, but she had no luck with true love. After 4 failed marriages and several ups and downs, a part of her went rogue. But first, let's get inside the life of this amazing actress and build up to her crazy, intimate life. Who was Doris Day? Doris Day, born Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff on April 3, 1922, was a force of nature in Hollywood. She was an actress, singer, and icon. She began her career in 1937 as a big band singer. In 1945, she hit it big with 2 massive hits, Sentimental Journey and My Dreams Are Getting Better All the Time. Both were with Les Brown and his band of renown. But after that, she went solo, and over the next 2 decades, she recorded over 650 songs. Yeah, she was that prolific. Now, Doris wasn't just a voice to be reckoned with. She was one of Hollywood's biggest stars in the 50s and 60s. Her film career kicked off with Romance on the High Seas in 1948, and from there, she was everywhere. She could do it all: musicals, comedies, dramas, even thrillers. In 1953, she played the legendary Calamity Jane. In 1956, she acted in Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much with James Stewart. But her comedies with Rock Hudson really turned heads, especially Pillow Talk, 1959. Their chemistry was off the charts. It earned Doris an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. She also teamed up with James Garner for 2 fun flicks in 1963, Move Over Darling and The Thrill of It All, and shared the screen with some of Hollywood's biggest names like Clark Gable, Cary Grant, James Cagney, Frank Sinatra, and Lauren Bacall. After her film career wound down in the late 60s, Doris didn't disappear. Instead, she jumped into TV with The Doris Day Show, 1968-1973, which was a big hit. Doris's legacy was celebrated all throughout her career and beyond. In 1989, she won a Golden Globe and the Cecil B. DeMille Award for Lifetime Achievement in Motion Pictures. In 2004, she got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In 2008, she added a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. She even earned a Legend Award from the Society of Singers. But she wasn't done yet. Doris released her 29th studio album, My Heart, in 2011, which went on to become a top 10 hit in the UK. Not bad for someone who, as of 2020, was one of only 8 artists to be the top box office earner in the US 4 times. Doris Day wasn't just a star, she was an era all on her own. The pain behind the star. Doris Day was a walking contradiction in the eyes of the public. On screen, she was the ultimate girl next door, sunny, charming, and wholesome. Audiences loved her for her comedies and feel-good romances. They always had happy endings. She was an ideal, the perfect partner, friend, and optimist. But in real life, her story couldn't have been more different. Doris's characters found love and happiness with ease. Her own love life was messy, painful, and full of betrayal. It's almost ironic. She could convincingly play someone with it all figured out. But behind the scenes, she was struggling to find the very thing her movies were about: love and stability. She played beloved characters. But in life, those she trusted let her down. Her personal struggles made the contrast even more striking. Her 4 failed marriages and financial betrayals were no fairy tale. They were far from the picture-perfect romances Hollywood sold to her fans. It's easy to wonder if those love stories were bittersweet for her. She was creating a fantasy she could never fully experience. Yet, she never let the public see the pain she carried. Doris was a professional through and through. No matter her personal issues, she showed up with a smile. She was ready to deliver the joy that audiences expected from her. She wasn't just acting in her movies. She was also playing a role in real life, hiding her heartbreak and struggles. This stark contrast between her screen persona and her real-life challenges is a big part of what makes her story so fascinating. It reminds us that even beloved stars have unseen battles. Doris Day's life wasn't the perfect love story her movies made it seem, but her strength and resilience in the face of it all made her story just as compelling. Her imperfect love story. Doris Day's love life was nothing like the fairy tale romances she brought to life on the big screen. It was a mess behind the scenes. While she charmed audiences with her sunny personality and perfect love stories, her real relationships were messy, heartbreaking, and far from the happily ever after she portrayed. Doris was married 4 times, and each one seemed to leave her with more pain than joy. Her first husband, Al Jordan, was a trombone player and, quite frankly, a nightmare of a man. He was abusive, controlling, and insanely jealous. Things got so bad that he reportedly forced her to have an abortion. It was a traumatic experience she carried with her. Their marriage didn't last long, and for good reason. Doris had to get away from his violent temper. It was a horrible chapter in her life that she rarely talked about. Her second marriage to George Weidler wasn't much better. George was a saxophonist, and while he didn't have Al's temper, he had his own issues. George just couldn't handle Doris's rising fame. Instead of supporting her, he felt overshadowed and insecure about her success. He walked away, leaving Doris heartbroken. She wondered if she'd ever find a lasting relationship. Then came Martin Melcher, her third husband. For a while, it seemed he was the stability she had sought. Martin was a movie producer and got heavily involved in managing her career, but after his death, Doris discovered he had secretly left her in a mountain of debt. He'd signed her up for projects without telling her. He mismanaged her money, leaving her to clean up the mess. It was a betrayal that cut deep, especially coming from someone she trusted so completely. Her fourth and final marriage was to Barry Comden, a restaurant owner. He seemed like a down-to-earth guy, but even that relationship didn't go the distance. Barry was much older, and they just couldn't make it work. Doris loved her quiet life and her animals, and Barry wanted something different. It wasn't long before they went their separate ways, leaving Doris single again. The thing is, Doris wanted love and stability more than anything. She didn't seek the spotlight in her personal life. She just wanted someone to be there for her and treat her right. But time and time again, her relationships fell apart, leaving her with more heartbreak than happiness. It's wild to think about the contrast between her real life and her on-screen image. While audiences saw this cheerful, lovable woman who seemed to have it all, behind closed doors, Doris was dealing with betrayal, disappointment, and a lot of pain that most people never saw. The secret affairs. There were always whispers and rumors about secret affairs and flings with some of Hollywood's biggest names. For a star like Doris, who was marketed as America's sweetheart, the idea of her having a steamy off-screen romance was both thrilling and scandalous. But the Hollywood machine was very good at keeping those kinds of stories under wraps, and Doris herself wasn't one to air her private life. So much of it remains speculation. One of the biggest rumors always revolved around her chemistry with her male co-stars. Take Rock Hudson, for instance. Every time they shared the screen, it was pure magic. Their banter was natural, their connection electric. It made people wonder if there was something real between them. Of course, Rock Hudson was keeping his own massive secret as a gay man in a time when that wasn't accepted, so any romantic link between him and Doris was probably more fantasy than fact. Still, their friendship was genuine, and their bond was so strong that it kept fans guessing. Then there's James Garner, another leading man who seemed to have amazing chemistry with Doris. They worked together on The Thrill of It All and Move Over, Darling, and the spark between them was undeniable. James himself once said that working with Doris was like working with a close friend. But you can't help but wonder if there was ever a moment where things might have blurred a bit. They were both married at the time, so any deeper connection would have had to stay under wraps if it existed at all. And it wasn't just her co-stars. There were always quiet rumors about influential men in Hollywood being drawn to Doris. She had this natural warmth and charm that made people gravitate toward her. Whether it was a producer, a director, or some studio exec, the idea of Doris having a fling with someone behind the scenes wasn't completely out of the question. But here's the thing. Doris wasn't one to lean on the casting couch to get ahead. She worked hard for her success, and if there were affairs, they were probably more about genuine connection than career moves. The press loved Doris, but they also knew how to protect her image. Back in those days, studios controlled everything. If a juicy story about an affair started to bubble up, the PR team would swoop in and either squash it completely or spin it into something innocent. They had to protect her squeaky clean reputation because it was such a big part of her brand. Doris wasn't the type to stir up drama, and the studio loved her for that. Even if something did happen behind closed doors, it never made it onto the front page. At the end of the day, we may never know the full truth about Doris's rumored lovers. She was fiercely private, and the Hollywood system of her time was built to keep secrets like that buried. But the speculation alone adds another layer of intrigue to her story. Whether those connections were real or just part of the Hollywood rumor mill, they show how magnetic and fascinating Doris Day truly was, both on screen and off. The hand of the studios. Doris Day's career thrived in an era when Hollywood studios had the power to control every aspect of their star's public image, and for Doris, that meant maintaining her reputation as America's wholesome all-American girl. the studio machine went to extraordinary lengths to ensure that nothing could tarnish her image, even if it meant hiding the messy realities of her personal life. Doris was, after all, a box office powerhouse, and her brand was built on being approachable, lovable, and perfectly innocent. Someone audiences could admire and trust. The studio's involvement in preserving Doris's pristine image was calculated and relentless. During her peak in the 1950s and 1960s, she was portrayed as a symbol of virtuous living, both on and off the screen. Her roles often depicted her as the good girl who resisted temptation, stood up for her principles, and eventually found love in the most wholesome way possible. But life doesn't always imitate art, and Doris's real life didn't align so neatly with the characters she played. The studios knew this and worked overtime to ensure that the public never found out. One example of this calculated image management was the way the studios handled her tumultuous personal life. Doris had 4 marriages, 2 of which were disastrous, particularly her first, to Al Jordan, who was abusive, and her third, to Martin Melcher, who left her in financial ruin. These kinds of stories could have easily sullied her public persona, so the studio's public relations teams stepped in to spin narratives that painted her as resilient and innocent, or they simply buried the uglier details altogether. Press coverage focused on her girl next door qualities, rather than the struggles she endured behind closed doors. Another tactic the studios used was outright suppression. Back in Doris's day, the tabloids and press were far more cooperative with Hollywood than they are today. If rumors of an affair or scandal began to surface, the studios would intervene, offering favors, exclusives, or even outright payments to ensure that negative stories never saw the light of day. For instance, speculation about her chemistry with co-stars like Rock Hudson or James Garner could have easily spun into salacious tabloid fodder, but the PR teams were quick to reframe these as purely professional relationships. In the case of Rock Hudson, whose sexuality was a closely guarded secret at the time, the studio machine went into overdrive to protect both his and Doris's images. Instead of letting rumors spiral, they promoted their friendship and on-screen partnership as a perfect example of platonic camaraderie, keeping anything more suggestive under wraps. Even Doris's financial troubles after Martin Melcher's death were carefully controlled in the media. Instead of letting the public dwell on how Melcher had mismanaged her finances and left her in millions of dollars of debt, the narrative was reframed to focus on Doris's resilience and determination to bounce back. Her lawsuit against her late husband's business associates and her eventual financial recovery became a story of triumph, not betrayal. What's particularly striking about all of this is how it contrasts with today's celebrity culture. In the age of social media, stars often share their lives directly with their fans, warts and all. Scandals, breakups, and even personal struggles are not only acknowledged but sometimes even leveraged for publicity. The transparency and rawness of today's celebrity world would have been unthinkable in Doris Day's time, where every detail was carefully curated to fit a brand. Doris herself was notoriously private, and while some of that was likely her preference, much of it was driven by the Hollywood system's insistence on maintaining control. Ultimately, the Hollywood cover-up wasn't unique to Doris Day, but it was particularly effective in her case because of how much her career relied on her wholesome, untouchable image. The studios were determined to keep her fans believing in the perfect Doris Day they saw on screen, even if the real Doris was dealing with heartbreak, betrayal, and personal struggles behind the scenes. It's a testament to how powerful the Hollywood machine once was, and how much it could conceal, even from the most adoring fans. From the Horse's Mouth, autobiography. Doris's personal views on intimacy are one of the most fascinating and private aspects of her life. She rarely talked about it openly, but when she did, or when bits and pieces were shared by those close to her, it became clear that her experiences with love and relationships left a deep mark on how she approached trust and connection. From her autobiographies and interviews, you can piece together a sense of how complicated her feelings about intimacy were. Doris wasn't someone who wore her heart on her sleeve, but her words often hinted at a vulnerability she tried to keep hidden. Growing up in a strict, somewhat conservative household, She likely had very traditional ideas about love and relationships instilled in her early on. Yet her life experiences, especially the traumas she endured in her marriages, must have challenged and reshaped those views over time. Her first marriage to Al Jordan was a horrifying introduction to intimacy. Being forced into situations against her will, including an abortion, was deeply scarring. It's hard to imagine how such an abusive relationship didn't leave lasting emotional walls. That kind of betrayal and control can make it incredibly difficult to trust others or feel safe in vulnerability. Doris was just a teenager at the time, barely stepping into adulthood, and those formative years were shaped by fear and manipulation. As she moved on to other relationships, there seemed to be a constant tension between her desire for love and the harsh realities of what she encountered. Doris had a romantic soul. She wanted to believe in the kind of love that her characters often found on screen. But time after time, life threw her curveballs. Husbands like Martin Melcher, who deceived her financially, only reinforced the idea that trust was fragile, and intimacy often came with strings attached or hidden agendas. People close to Doris have said that she had a practical side when it came to relationships. She wasn't one to openly chase passion or whirlwind romances. Instead, she seemed to long for a steady, dependable connection. But society, particularly during her heyday, had certain expectations for women, especially someone with her wholesome image. The public loved to see her as a symbol of purity and light, and that must have been a lot of pressure for someone navigating the messy reality of relationships behind the scenes. Did she ever feel trapped by these expectations? Maybe. She lived in a time when women were often judged harshly for seeking happiness outside of traditional roles, and that might explain why Doris kept so much of her personal life tightly under wraps. There's also speculation about whether Doris sought freedom in her personal life or felt constrained by societal norms. She never seemed like the type to follow a rebellious path, but she did make bold decisions when it came to walking away from relationships that didn't serve her. Leaving Al Jordan and George Weidler took courage, especially at a time when divorce was still somewhat stigmatized. Yet, she didn't exactly push back publicly against the role society expected her to play. She quietly lived her life, making choices that protected her peace without turning it into a public statement. Through it all, Doris Day's relationship with intimacy seems to have been deeply influenced by her early traumas, her longing for real love, and the immense pressure of being one of Hollywood's most adored stars. Whether she ever fully found what she was looking for is something only she could have answered, but one thing is certain: she faced these struggles with grace, strength, and an unshakable will to keep moving forward. After Hollywood. After Doris Day retired from acting, she didn't just fade into the background. Instead, she poured herself into something that truly mattered to her: animal rights. It might surprise some people who only know her as the wholesome, singing, dancing star of the 50s and 60s, but Doris was deeply passionate about animals her entire life. She had a love for animals that was bigger than any role she ever played on screen, and that love became her next big mission. In 1978, she founded the Doris Day Animal Foundation, DDAF, an organization dedicated to protecting animals, supporting rescue operations, and advocating for better laws to safeguard animals from cruelty and neglect. She was more than just a figurehead. Doris was hands-on in her work. She was deeply involved in the foundation's efforts, working tirelessly behind the scenes, even though her Hollywood days were behind her. The DDAF continues its mission today, focusing on initiatives like rescuing animals in need, promoting responsible pet ownership, and raising awareness about the importance of animal welfare. Her foundation was her life's work after the cameras stopped rolling. Doris didn't just talk the talk when it came to animals. She walked the walk. Her personal life was full of rescues, and she had many pets over the years, including dogs, cats, and even a few horses. She was a strong advocate for adopting animals from shelters rather than buying them from breeders, and she used her platform to encourage others to do the same. She even campaigned for better living conditions for animals in zoos and circuses, areas that were often poorly regulated back then. Her passion for animals wasn't just about keeping them out of harm's way. It was also about giving them the best life possible. Doris's commitment to improving the lives of animals in shelters, advocating for animal-friendly laws, and even funding rescue organizations showed that she cared deeply about the well-being of every living creature. In fact, she once said, "I just want to help animals and be their voice." And she meant it. She also didn't shy away from using her fame to further the cause. Whether through interviews, public appearances, or her work with the DDAF, Doris brought much-needed attention to animal issues. In an era when most stars were focused on their careers or public personas, Doris was quietly making a difference. And it wasn't just a passing interest. This was something that stayed with her for the rest of her life. Her dedication to animal welfare also led to her receiving a ton of accolades and awards, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2004, which highlighted her work with animals and the impact she made off-screen. In the years leading up to her death in 2019, Doris was still an active supporter of animal rights, continuing her advocacy and working through the foundation to help as many animals as possible. The world watched her become a household name as the lovable, wholesome Ellie Mae Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies. But there was so much more to Donna than the iconic character she portrayed. Men adored her not just for her beauty or her on-screen charm, but for qualities that went beyond the surface. From her entrepreneurial ventures to her natural charm, Donna Douglas left a lasting impression on everyone she met. So, why did men, along with countless women, fall in love with her? Let's take a deeper look at the traits that made Donna Douglas not just a star, but an unforgettable icon. She was the girl next door. Donna Douglas had that vibe you just couldn't resist, the kind of charm that made her feel like the girl next door. And by that, I mean she wasn't trying to be anything she wasn't. She was just real. And that made her so easy to like. No fake airs, no pretenses, just pure, genuine goodness. Take her role as Ellie Mae Clampett in The Beverly Hillbillies. Ellie Mae was the embodiment of that down-to-earth charm. She wasn't trying to be fancy or glamorous. She was a fun, sweet character who was always herself. Whether she was chasing after animals or trying to help her family figure out how to deal with their new rich life, Ellie Mae was just there, doing her thing. And it was that natural warmth that made people love her. You didn't need to be someone super fancy to win hearts. Donna showed you could just be yourself and still be adored. What's cool about Donna's charm is that it wasn't forced. It didn't feel like she was putting on a show. Ellie Mae was someone who you could imagine hanging out with, someone you'd want to be friends with, you know? There was this authenticity about Donna that made her so approachable. You didn't have to try to impress people to be loved. Just being kind, genuine, and real was enough. It's the type of charm that's so easy to connect with, especially in a world where so many Hollywood stars were all about that perfect, polished image. Donna wasn't trying to be perfect. She just was who she was, and that was so refreshing. She made you feel like you could be her friend without all the glam and glitter. She didn't need to be someone you couldn't relate to. She was just herself, and that's what made her so special. She had this way of making you feel like you belonged, like she was the kind of person you could sit down with and have a genuine conversation. And let's be real, who doesn't want that in a friend or a star? Donna had this natural ability to make people feel at ease, like she was one of us. She wasn't trying to be a bigger-than-life star, she just let her true, kind nature shine through. And honestly, that's a pretty rare thing in Hollywood. It's the kind of charm that makes you admire someone, not because they're perfect, but because they're so refreshingly real. Her girl-next-door vibe wasn't just a character trait, it was her. That realness made her stand out in a time when a lot of stars were caught up in the whole untouchable vibe. Donna was someone who didn't need to be larger than life to be adored. She showed us that being kind, relatable, and just yourself could make you unforgettable. That's why men and women alike couldn't help but love her. She didn't try too hard, she just let her true self shine. And in a world full of glitz and glam, Donna Douglas was a breath of fresh air. Her contagious energy. Donna Douglas had this energy about her that was just contagious. You know the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately lifts the mood? That was her, even when playing Ellie Mae on the Beverly Hillbillies. She didn't just play the part, she became it. Her character was full of life, always bringing a burst of joy and excitement. And honestly, you couldn't help but feel the same way when you saw her on screen. Her energy wasn't just about being loud or over the top, though. It was this warm, natural enthusiasm that made you smile every time she showed up. It was the kind of vibe that made her character so lovable and approachable. Ellie Mae wasn't just the cute, sweet country girl, she was the embodiment of fun, always enthusiastic and ready for whatever came her way. That positive attitude was impossible not to get swept up in. And it wasn't just Ellie Mae where Donna's energy came through. In real life, she was known for being bubbly and full of life. She was the kind of person who made everything seem a little brighter just by being there. Whether it was chatting with fans, showing up to events, or just being around her co-stars, you could feel that buzz of energy around her. It was effortless, too, not something she had to force. She just had that natural ability to make people feel good. Men and women loved that about her. Who wouldn't want to be around someone who could make any situation feel fun and exciting? Donna's energy wasn't about being the loudest or the most dramatic. It was the kind of vibe that made people feel happy just being near her. It's that kind of positivity and enthusiasm that makes people memorable, and Donna Douglas definitely left an impression with hers. Her infectious energy also gave her an edge. Even when she wasn't the lead in a scene, she had this way of bringing everything to life. Her enthusiasm could light up even the most mundane moments, making her presence impossible to ignore. You were always drawn to her, even if she was just there to support the main action. That ability to stand out in any setting, it's something people admired and loved about her. In a world where it's easy to feel weighed down by the daily grind, Donna's energy was a refreshing reminder that life can be full of joy, excitement, and fun. She made you want to keep up with her and maybe for a moment forget about your own stresses. And that's one of the reasons people just couldn't get enough of her, because her energy was the kind that left you feeling lighter and happier every time she graced the screen. Her elegance was timeless. Donna Douglas had this effortless elegance that made her stand out from the crowd. She wasn't flashy or trying to be over the top. It was a quiet, refined kind of grace that made her unforgettable. Whether she was on or off screen, she had a way of carrying herself that made you think, wow, she's classy. Take her role as Ellie Mae in the Beverly Hillbillies. Even though Ellie was the fun country girl next door, there was still an undeniable elegance in how Donna played her. Whether she was dressed in simple country clothes or playing the role of the naive but adorable hillbilly, there was a certain poise about her that made every moment feel special. She made modest clothing look chic, and her natural beauty shone through without any of the need for heavy makeup or flashy outfits. It was all in the way she carried herself. There was a quiet sophistication about her that felt timeless. In real life, this elegance wasn't something she had to work at. Donna wasn't someone who followed trends or tried to keep up with the latest fads. Instead, she had a classic sense of style that always seemed to fit her perfectly. Whether she was attending an event or just going about her day, her fashion choices were always chic without being overdone. It was this timeless elegance that made her not only beautiful but also incredibly graceful even in her more casual moments. Men loved that about her. There was something deeply attractive about a woman who didn't need to shout for attention. Donna's elegance came from within. It was in her posture, the way she spoke, the way she interacted with others. She didn't need a lot of fanfare to be noticed. She simply exuded grace, and it drew people in. What made Donna's elegance stand out even more was the fact that it wasn't about perfection. She wasn't trying to be some unattainable ideal. Instead, she was comfortable in her own skin. It was this authenticity paired with her graceful nature that gave her a rare kind of beauty, one that didn't fade with time. In a world where trends and looks changed so quickly, Donna's elegance was something that never went out of style. It was a trait that made her beloved by both men and women alike, and one that made her shine in every role she took on. She was genuinely kind. Donna Douglas was the kind of person who made you feel special without even trying. She wasn't just an actress, she was genuinely kind, warm, and down to earth. Fans and co-stars alike always spoke about her sweetness and how approachable she was. There was nothing put on about her kindness. It wasn't a part of her image or a calculated move to gain favor. She simply had a good heart, and it came through in everything she did. But this goodness wasn't just something Donna played on screen. It reflected her real personality. She was known for being generous with her time, always taking the time to chat with fans and make them feel seen. It was clear that her kindness wasn't for show, it was just who she was. Her genuine warmth and caring nature extended beyond the set and into her everyday life. Donna was someone who looked out for people, and that was true in her interactions with both her colleagues and the public. She didn't need to be the center of attention. She was content just making those around her feel happy and valued. Whether she was helping a co-star, chatting with a fan, or simply being a kind person in a world that often seemed to reward the opposite, Donna's heart was always in the right place. That kind of kindness is magnetic. It's one of those qualities that makes people want to be around you. And men? They love a woman who is genuinely caring and compassionate. There's something incredibly attractive about someone who makes others feel good about themselves. Donna's genuine kindness wasn't just limited to the people she knew personally. It was something that radiated to everyone she met, and it's one of the reasons she was so adored by so many. Her kindness wasn't just something she showed in small gestures either. She cared about causes and people who needed help, always willing to lend a hand. It's rare to see someone who genuinely gives their time and energy to others without expecting anything in return. That's what made Donna Douglas not only beloved by those who knew her, but respected by all who came across her path. She didn't need to be a diva to be adored. Her kindness did all the work for her. And that, my friends, is a trait that never goes out of style. She was independent. Donna Douglas wasn't just a pretty face or a sweet personality. She was a woman with an unwavering sense of independence. In a time when many actresses were expected to fit a certain mold, she carved her own path. She wasn't afraid to stand up for herself or make her own decisions, and that made her all the more attractive to both men and women alike. Take her decision to pursue a career in acting. At the time, it wasn't the easiest road for a woman to follow, especially for someone like Donna, who came from a small town and didn't have the usual connections that many in Hollywood did. But she was determined. She didn't just wait for an opportunity to come to her, she went after it. And that tenacity eventually led her to the role of Ellie Mae in The Beverly Hillbillies, which became a defining moment in her career. What made Donna's independence even more admirable was the way she stayed true to herself throughout her career. In an industry that often pressured women to conform to certain standards, Donna didn't try to be something she wasn't. She didn't follow trends, and she didn't let anyone tell her who she should be. She was perfectly content with carving out her own niche and doing things on her own terms. That confidence in her own identity was magnetic. It showed that she didn't need validation from anyone else to feel worthy, and her independence didn't stop at her career. Donna wasn't afraid to make bold choices in her personal life, too. She took the time to travel, to explore new interests, and to live her life the way she saw fit. She was never the type to be overly reliant on others or to let circumstances dictate her happiness. Instead, she worked hard to shape her own destiny, which only made her more inspiring. Men and women respect a woman who knows what she wants and doesn't shy away from going after it. Donna's ability to balance her career, personal life, and passions all while remaining true to herself was an admirable quality. It's that fierce independence that set her apart and made her even more intriguing to those who looked up to her. The fact that she didn't let anything or anyone stand in her way was one of the many things that made her so captivating. Her natural beauty. When you think of Donna Douglas, it's impossible not to think of her radiant beauty. But what made Donna stand out wasn't just her classic good looks, it was how effortless and natural she was. She wasn't the typical Hollywood glamour queen, and that was part of her charm. There was something about her beauty that felt real, down to earth, and approachable. She didn't have to put on a show to look beautiful. It was just who she was. Her beauty was part of the character's simplicity and innocence. With her bright smile, flowing blonde hair, and sparkling eyes, Donna embodied the girl-next-door image, but with a touch of elegance. Her natural beauty made her stand out among the Hollywood starlets who often leaned on heavy makeup and glamorized looks. Donna didn't need all of that to shine. She was radiant without all the frills, and it's one of the reasons why she captured so many hearts. But her beauty wasn't just about her looks. It was also about how she carried herself. She had a confidence in her own skin that made her even more stunning. You could tell she was comfortable in who she was, and that kind of self-assurance is magnetic. Whether she was on screen or off, her grace and poise added to her beauty, making her presence unforgettable. In a world where people are constantly trying to fit into unrealistic standards of beauty, Donna's natural approach was refreshing. She didn't rely on heavy makeup or dramatic hairstyles to get attention. Instead, she let her authenticity shine through, and that made her even more beautiful in the eyes of those around her. Men were drawn to her because her beauty wasn't forced. It was effortless, unpretentious, and most of all, real. Her beauty, combined with her easygoing charm, made her someone you could imagine wanting to spend time with, not just because of how she looked, but because of how she made you feel. She made beauty seem like something attainable and relatable, and that's why so many admired her. There was nothing artificial about Donna Douglas. She was as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside, and that's a rarity in the world of show business. She had strong work ethic. She was also one of the hardest working women in Hollywood. She didn't just show up for work. She gave it her all, every single time. This strong work ethic was evident in everything she did, both on and off screen, and it made her stand out even more in an industry full of stars. In all the roles she played, it wasn't just about looking cute and playing a fun, lovable character. Donna worked tirelessly to make Ellie Mae, for instance, memorable. She dedicated herself to making sure the character felt authentic, bringing warmth, humor, and real emotion to a role that could have easily been played as one-dimensional. And it wasn't just her acting skills that shone through. Donna also learned how to do many of the stunts and physical work her character required, including horseback riding and animal handling. This wasn't just about acting for her. It was about giving the audience the best version of the character she possibly could. But her hard work didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Donna was incredibly dedicated to her career, always seeking out new opportunities to challenge herself and grow. She didn't just stick with TV, she also appeared in movies and even had a successful career in music, releasing a couple of country albums. It was her versatility and willingness to work hard that allowed her to continue expanding her career throughout the years. And she wasn't just a workhorse in show business. Donna took that same dedication into her personal life. She worked hard to maintain a balance between her career and family life, making sure to stay grounded even as her fame grew. She understood the importance of family and was committed to her personal values, which made her even more relatable to her fans. Men admired Donna for this kind of commitment and drive. She was someone who didn't just sit back and expect success to come to her. She went out and earned it. And she didn't do it for the fame or the recognition. She did it because she truly cared about her craft and wanted to be the best at it. That level of dedication is something people can't help but respect and admire. She was down to earth. Donna Douglas had an infectious, down-to-earth vibe that made everyone feel like they were in the presence of a real, relatable person. She wasn't interested in playing the Hollywood diva or surrounding herself with a fake lifestyle. She was approachable, warm, and completely unpretentious, and that's what made her so lovable. She embodied this grounded, relatable charm. While some of her characters might have lived in a mansion in Beverly Hills, in real life, she was far from a typical spoiled, pampered rich girl. She was sweet, fun-loving, and utterly genuine. And Donna's portrayal of her was the same. She didn't put on airs, she was just Donna, the girl next door who happened to be living out a unique story on TV. Off camera, Donna was known for being just as approachable. Despite the fame that came with the Beverly Hillbillies, She never let it go to her head. She took the time to connect with her fans and had a way of making everyone she met feel important. Her sincerity and lack of ego were refreshing in an industry where fame often comes with a sense of entitlement. Donna never acted like she was above anyone. She simply treated people with kindness and respect. Her down-to-earth nature was also evident in how she lived her life. She had a no-nonsense attitude, and while she enjoyed the perks of fame, she never seemed to get caught up in the chaos that often surrounds it. She knew how to keep things real and maintained a strong sense of who she was, even as her popularity grew. It's easy to admire someone who can remain grounded when everything around them is constantly changing. For men, her humble and genuine personality was incredibly attractive. There was nothing intimidating or distant about Donna. She was the kind of woman you could imagine sitting down with, having a real conversation, and just enjoying life without any pretense. And for women? They admired her for the same reason. Donna was a role model for being true to yourself, no matter what the world throws at you. She didn't need to be anything other than herself to be adored, and that's a rare quality in Hollywood, where so many people are putting on a show. A serial entrepreneur. While many TV stars from her era let their fame define them, Donna wasn't content to rest on her laurels. She understood the power of building something lasting beyond the spotlight, and she made sure to carve out a life that reflected her independence and business acumen. After her iconic role as Ellie Mae Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies, Donna didn't simply fade into the background. Instead, she turned her focus to other ventures, proving that she could thrive in multiple arenas. She wasn't just a former TV star, she was a woman who could get things done. For instance, Donna turned to writing, publishing books like Miss Donna's Cookbook and Donna Douglas, the Girl Who Had Everything. She didn't just write about food or Hollywood. Her books reflected her passion for sharing knowledge and connecting with people. It was clear that Donna had a creative side that extended far beyond acting. But she didn't stop there. Donna also ventured into real estate, proving she wasn't afraid to take on new challenges. In a field that required business savvy and a keen understanding of markets, Donna showed she could navigate the complexities of a competitive industry and still maintain her elegance and charm. Perhaps one of her most surprising yet impressive moves was becoming a financial advisor. In an era where many stars were at the mercy of managers and agents, Donna took control of her financial future, learning the ropes of wealth management and helping others make sound financial decisions. This wasn't just a side hustle for her. It was a full-fledged career, demonstrating her resourcefulness and her commitment to empowering herself and others. What do a telegram divorce, a sabotage sisterhood, and a banned stage script have in common? Joan Fontaine. And this isn't the version Hollywood ever wanted you to hear. The girl who changed her name. She wasn't born a star. She wasn't even born Joan. In 1917, in Tokyo, Japan, she entered the world as Joan de Beauvoir de Havilland. Her British parents were upper class and proper, but Joan didn't exactly grow up in comfort. Chronic illnesses like anemia and measles made her childhood rough. Her mother moved Joan and her sister Olivia to California when the marriage fell apart. That's when the rivalry quietly began. Both sisters were drawn to acting. Olivia de Havilland jumped in first and grabbed Hollywood's attention early. Joan, still in her teens, followed close behind. But right away, she was warned. Two de Havillands wouldn't work in the same industry. So she grabbed a phone directory, scrolled through names, and picked Fontaine, after her stepfather. Just like that, Joan de Havilland vanished, and Joan Fontaine was born. Her early years in Hollywood were no fairy tale. She started with tiny roles, maids, secretaries, girls who barely got screen time. She failed so many screen tests, she once said she thought the camera didn't like her face. Studio heads weren't impressed. They called her too quiet, too soft, and not sexy enough for stardom. But Joan wasn't trying to play Hollywood's game. In interviews, she mocked the phoniness of it all. She refused to flirt her way into roles which didn't win her many friends. Then came Rebecca. Alfred Hitchcock cast her in the lead after several others backed out. Joan brought something new, nervous energy, real vulnerability, and restraint. The part turned her into an overnight sensation. Critics loved her, but she still got snubbed at the Oscars. It didn't matter. She was finally seen, and not as Olivia's sister. By the time Suspicion came around, she wasn't just another face in a supporting cast. She was the star. And when that Oscar win came in 1942, Joan didn't hold back. Her acceptance was poised, but when Olivia reached out to congratulate her, Joan brushed right past. The rivalry was real. The name change, just the beginning. Sibling rivalry goes nuclear. Hollywood has had its share of sibling drama, but none quite like Joan Fontaine and Olivia de Havilland. At first, people didn't even realize they were sisters. Different last names helped with that, but behind the scenes, the tension was always simmering, and eventually, it exploded. Their rivalry wasn't about clothes or boys, it was about fame, pure and simple. Both were talented, ambitious, and determined to win. Early on, they even auditioned for the same roles. Joan wanted Gone with the Wind, just like Olivia. She didn't get it, Olivia did. That one stung. But Joan didn't say much. Not then. Things really hit a boiling point in 1941. Joan landed the lead in Hitchcock's Suspicion. Olivia was working on Hold Back the Dawn. Both were nominated for Best Actress at the Oscars. Joan won. And when Olivia tried to congratulate her with a handshake, Joan turned and walked off stage. Some say it was nerves, others call it a straight-up snub. Joan never really explained it. Olivia never forgot it. Over the years, the Cold War between them kept growing. They stopped attending the same events. At one press function, Joan reportedly told photographers, "I don't have a sister." That line made headlines and cracked the relationship for good. At another event, they sat at opposite ends of the table and didn't say a single word. Joan's memoir, No Bed of Roses, made things worse. In it, she accused Olivia of being jealous, cruel, and controlling. Olivia fired back in interviews, calling Joan a dragon lady and a liar. They didn't even speak when their mother passed away. Joan claimed Olivia didn't tell her about the funeral. Olivia denied it. Even in their later years, when both lived into their 90s, they stayed apart. No reunion, no forgiveness, just silence. What started as a quiet competition turned into one of the ugliest feuds in Hollywood history. And the strange part? It wasn't played for the cameras. It was real, sharp, personal, and lasting until the very end. Playing the good girl with a bite. She made her name playing shy, delicate women, soft-spoken types who looked like they might cry if you raised your voice. Her characters in Rebecca and Suspicion fit that mold perfectly. But off-screen, Joan wasn't that girl. Behind the scenes, she was sharp, stubborn, and surprisingly blunt. Crew members often said she was more sarcastic than sweet. While directors expected her to stay quiet and compliant, Joan asked hard questions. She didn't flirt to get ahead and didn't care who liked her. When one producer suggested she smile more, she replied, "Why? Does it help you act better?" She smoked constantly and gambled for fun. At Hollywood parties, she told dirty jokes and made fun of studio bosses to their faces. More than once, she was asked to tone it down, especially in interviews. Her reply? "I'll speak how I speak. Don't ask if you don't want the answer." Even other actors were caught off guard. Cary Grant, who starred with her in Suspicion, once said she had a quiet steel behind her eyes. On set, she pushed back on scripts that felt lazy or roles that made her feel like wallpaper. Directors learned fast. You couldn't just place her in the background and expect her to play nice. This contrast between her screen image and real personality baffled some fans. They expected her to be soft and fragile. Instead, she came off cool and calculating. In one interview, she admitted she hated the word nice because it usually means you're forgettable. That attitude came with a price. She didn't get the same cushy roles as her peers, but Joan didn't care. "I'm not here to be liked," she once said. "I'm here to be remembered." And she was, just not for the reasons Hollywood had planned. Feuding with Hitchcock. She owed a lot to Alfred Hitchcock. Rebecca made her a star. Suspicion won her an Oscar. But don't be fooled, she didn't exactly enjoy working with him, and she definitely wasn't afraid to say so. Their relationship started off well. Hitchcock liked actresses he could shape. Joan was new, quiet, and eager for good roles. But once filming started, things shifted. Hitchcock's directing style was cold and precise. He demanded obedience. Joan didn't always give it. During Suspicion, she fought him on how her character should be played. He wanted her passive, confused, almost childlike. Joan thought the role deserved more edge. She questioned blocking, refused to cry on cue, and didn't like being handled like a puppet, as she put it. They butted heads often. Hitchcock reportedly told producers he'd never work with her again. Joan didn't care. She told friends that Hitchcock had a woman problem. He liked his actresses blonde, blank, and obedient. "I was blonde," she said, "but I wasn't going to be blank." Things came to a breaking point after Suspicion wrapped. The studio re-edited the film so that Cary Grant's character came off less threatening, and Joan's character seemed more naive. Hitchcock hated the change, but Joan refused to reshoot scenes unless her contract was renegotiated. She knew her worth, and she wasn't going to be pushed around. After that, Hitchcock moved on to other blondes. He worked with Ingrid Bergman, Grace Kelly, and Tippi Hedren. Joan was never on his call sheet again. Years later, when asked if she'd ever work with him again, Joan smirked and said, "Only if I directed." Hollywood marriages, Fontaine style. She didn't do quiet romances or picture-perfect marriages. She had 4 husbands and left each one with her signature flair. From the start, she made it clear. She wasn't looking for someone to complete her. She wanted someone who wouldn't get in her way. Her first marriage was to actor Brian Aherne in 1939. On paper, they looked perfect. In reality, Joan found him dull. She said he treated her like a chatty little girl. After 4 years, she was done. She filed for divorce, citing mental cruelty. Translation: she was bored. Next came William Dozier, a producer. They married in 1946 and had a daughter, Deborah. That didn't smooth things over. Joan once said William had a marvelous head for business except when it involved me. She'd correct him and challenge his decisions during meetings. He didn't like that. They divorced in 1951. Her third marriage was to Collier Young, the ex-husband of actress Ida Lupino. The marriage started fast and fell apart faster. Joan filed for divorce by telegram while she was traveling in Hong Kong. When asked why, she said, "Better than waiting until I got home and forgot." They stayed friends afterward, which surprised everyone. Her final marriage was to a sports writer named Alfred Wright Jr. By then, Joan was nearing 50. She said he was young and flexible, which amused her. But after 5 years, she ended it like the others, with no regret and no looking back. Joan didn't apologize for how her marriages ended. She believed in love, just not in losing herself. She once said, "The only constant in my life has been me. Everyone else comes and goes." That attitude made her hard to pin down and impossible to control. War work that raised eyebrows. While other Hollywood stars posed for war bond posters, Joan Fontaine decided to do something else, something real. When World War II broke out, she didn't just slap on a uniform for a photo op. She trained as a nurse's aide, drove military vehicles, and visited wounded soldiers in actual hospitals. Not sound stages. The public didn't quite know what to make of it. Joan joined the Hollywood canteen, sure, but she also worked with the American Women's Voluntary Services. She took part in civil defense drills, learned how to administer first aid, and even got certified in air raid protocol. One studio head begged her to stop, worried she'd get injured or ruin her star image. She ignored him. Then came Yank magazine, a publication aimed at boosting morale among U.S. troops. Joan agreed to a photo shoot, but not just any shoot. The pictures showed her in silky robes with her hair undone and her legs exposed. For the time, it was practically scandalous. The troops loved it. Middle America? Not so much. Some conservative outlets slammed her, saying it was unbecoming for an Oscar winner to pose like that. Joan didn't flinch. "If it helps a soldier get through the day," she said, I'll wear silk. She believed glamour had its place, even in war, especially then. Joan also toured hospitals and gave speeches at army bases. She didn't just wave and leave. She sat with soldiers, held their hands, and listened to their stories. One nurse later said, "She wasn't just acting caring. She really was." Even with all this, she never stopped working. Between 1942 and 1945, she filmed multiple movies while volunteering on the side. The press didn't always cover it. Joan didn't care. "I'm not in this for headlines," she said. "I'm in it because it matters." The tell-all memoir bombshell. By the late 1970s, Joan Fontaine had stopped caring what Hollywood thought of her. So when she published her memoir, No Bed of Roses, she didn't hold back. The book wasn't soft or sentimental. It was sharp, detailed, and at times brutal. She went straight for the jugular. The feud with Olivia? It was in there, fully exposed. Joan claimed their mother always favored Olivia and described their childhood as tense and competitive. She recounted the infamous Oscar night, saying Olivia was cold and never truly happy for her success. Joan even revealed she and Olivia hadn't spoken in decades, not even after family deaths. The book didn't stop with family. Joan wrote about ex-husbands, studio heads, co-stars, and lovers, some named, some kept anonymous but clearly recognizable. One chapter hinted at an affair with a well-known director. Another took aim at an actress she claimed got roles for reasons that had nothing to do with talent. Hollywood wasn't pleased. The press called it too personal. Some accused her of exaggerating. Joan just smiled. "If it's uncomfortable," she said, "maybe it's because it's true." She also opened up about the darker parts of her life: fame fatigue, broken marriages, and loneliness. She admitted she often felt like a stranger in her own house. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "I had fame, not peace," she wrote. Critics were split. Some praised the honesty. Others said it was attention-seeking. But the book sold well and got people talking. For Joan, that was enough. What really made jaws drop was her tone. She wasn't asking for pity. She wasn't bitter. She was amused, sharp-tongued, and utterly unapologetic. When a journalist asked if she regretted writing anything, she said, "Only the parts I left out." Stage comebacks and power plays. When the film roles started drying up in the 60s, Joan Fontaine didn't fade quietly into retirement. She went back to the stage, but not as a grateful has-been. She returned on her own terms. Joan toured across the U.S. and Europe, starring in live productions of The Lion in Winter, Private Lives, and Tea and Sympathy. She wasn't just acting, she was controlling casting, wardrobe, and in some cases, rewriting lines. Directors who didn't listen to her notes didn't last long. She wasn't interested in being a team player. She wanted results. One famous incident happened during a production of a Tennessee Williams play. Joan didn't like the script's pacing, so she changed several of her lines during live performances. When the playwright's rep complained, she shrugged and said, "Then tell him to write it better." She also demanded top billing. Always. Even if her role wasn't the lead, her name had to appear first. In one production, she threatened to walk out when a co-star's name appeared slightly larger on the poster. The theater caved. Costume designers had a hard time too. Joan was particular about fabrics, fits, and colors. If she didn't like the wardrobe, she'd bring in her own. Once, she refused to go on stage unless the lighting was adjusted to her shade of ivory. It delayed the show by 45 minutes. But she wasn't doing this just to be difficult. Joan believed theater was sacred. It was where real acting happened, where there were no second takes. She once said, "Film flatters, stage reveals." Audiences came for the drama, both on and off stage. She still had star power, and ticket sales proved it. Critics called her demanding but magnetic. Theater owners called her a force of nature. Late-life eccentricity or freedom? As the years rolled on, Joan Fontaine slipped out of the spotlight, but she never slipped into normal. In her final decades, she lived in Carmel by the Sea, California, far from the cameras, surrounded by dogs, books, and old film reels. Friends and neighbors called her eccentric. Joan called it peace. She spent her days gardening, painting, and writing letters to fans. But don't picture a cozy old lady in a rocking chair. Joan was still sharp, still snarky, and still very much herself. She'd host dinner parties and assign guests roles from her old films. If someone showed up late or forgot their character, she'd send them home. No second chances. Joan also had a thing for rules. Her rules. She didn't allow small talk in her home. Visitors had to be invited, not just drop in. She reportedly once turned away a journalist because they wore jeans. "This isn't a barn," she said, shutting the door. Her dogs were her real companions. She talked to them more than people and gave them names like Scamp, Dancer, and Lily Pons. She said they were better conversationalists than most actors she worked with. She left instructions in her will for how each dog should be cared for after her passing. She also kept scrapbooks, detailed journals, and boxes of personal letters, many of which offered blunt takes on old co-stars, politics, and aging. One letter to a friend read, "I don't miss fame. I miss being underestimated." Even at 90, she gave interviews with a sharp tongue. She called modern Hollywood a circus and said too many actors can't even speak clearly. When asked if she'd ever reconcile with Olivia, she replied, "If I wanted peace, I'd take a nap." The final word was hers. She died in her sleep on December 15, 2013, at age 96. She left this world the same way she lived in it, on her own terms, quietly defiant, and a little bit mysterious. She passed away in her Carmel home, with her dogs nearby, and her affairs already in perfect order. No press statements, no deathbed regrets. Just a quiet end to a loud legacy. Olivia de Havilland, still alive at the time, issued a short, polite statement. There was no sign of a reunion, no mention of reconciliation. The decades-long silence between them never broke. When Joan's will was released, there was no doubt the rift was permanent. Olivia was completely excluded. Instead, Joan left her belongings to close friends, longtime staff, and animal charities. Her handwritten notes were clear and direct, no drama, just decisions. Among her personal items were treasures that told the real story: early rejection letters from studios, private telegrams from Alfred Hitchcock, fan mail she never threw away, and a copy of her Oscar speech with edits scribbled in red ink. Also found was a yellowed note taped inside her desk drawer. It read, "Don't trust praise. Don't fear criticism. Trust your gut." That single line summed up her entire career. After her passing, Hollywood tiptoed around her legacy. Some praised her Oscar-winning roles. Others brought up the feud. But fans remembered the whole package: talented, stubborn, fierce, and unforgettable. Joan never softened with age. She never tried to rewrite her story to fit public taste. She said what she meant, did what she wanted, and didn't care who liked it. Even in her last interviews, when asked how she'd like to be remembered, she answered, "I wouldn't. I lived it. That's enough." No grand finale, no curtain call, just Joan, unfiltered, unbothered, and always one step outside the spotlight.